This is the first video that I'm making specifically for YouTube, and I wanted to talk about my recovery. If you're new here, I'm Chanel. I recovered after 7 years of chronic fatigue syndrome, which included dizziness, migraines, tinnitus, severe anxiety, fatigue, obviously, and it felt like other things, but those are the main ones. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about my recovery story. Before getting hit with all the symptoms, looking back, I realized that there was a chronic disconnection from myself that I was living in for probably since childhood. There was a lot of confusion around if what I was feeling was real, like an emotion, if it was valid, if I was being overly dramatic, if I was even just maybe just not valid in any emotion that I was experiencing. And we can go into all the reasons why, that happened in my childhood. But I guess understanding it could be helpful. Most of the time it was just like, okay, how do I go from here? I don't want to think about forever that, my parents didn't know better and they emotionally gaslit me my whole childhood and made me feel invalid and things like that. Oh well, right? They were doing their best. It can be helpful to process those things and to make sense of those things so that you can figure out where it came from and you can just feel, oh, that makes sense, right? But for me, it was very much like, okay, where do I go from here, right? So it took a while. It took maybe 5.5 years for me to even find mind-body concepts. I was doing a lot of the doctors, the specialists. I got into naturopaths, herbalists. I did a lot of like energy type medicine, Reiki. It gets to be such a blur. I mean, I was reaching out to psychics like crazy towards the end. But then when I stumbled upon mind-body stuff, my first introduction with it was Dr. Joe Dispenza. And I really respect his work, but it made me feel like the healing journey was very complicated and very, very heavy on the spirituality. And I was like, man, I have to, I guess, meditate 5 hours a day. And at one point I did because I wasn't doing anything else and the pain was so severe. I was like, yeah, I'll meditate for 5 hours a day. And it sort of became more of a dissociation rather than rewiring. So I love his work. I really do. And I guess it wasn't accessible for me at the time to really get that shift. So actually getting into more mind-body concepts rooted in Dr. Sarno, things like that, things were starting to make more sense, but it felt very hard to grasp still. It was like this years of programming and going to doctors and seeing the labs even where they were like, oh, look at these viruses you have, they're off the charts. Look at this bacteria, look at this, all these things that it's like a lot of people will say like, oh my gosh, like all my labs are normal. What's going on? And it's like with a lot of functional medicine or naturopathic medicine, they will find things that are wrong, and maybe that is the source of where the symptoms started. Okay. But I did so much of like antiviral protocols, heavy metal detoxes, detoxing from mold. Like I did so much and it didn't make a difference. It actually often made me worse. Now I know that was the stress of my nervous system being like more fight or flight, more detox, more this, more strain on my body, right? But again, I didn't know that at the time. I also got into medical medium protocols. I was very, very, very strict with medical medium stuff for a full year. Like a full year of my life was deep into all the protocols, all the supplements, everything. It didn't make a difference. It didn't make a difference for me. And so it was just an uphill battle of all these limiting beliefs, basically concluding that I was the type of person that couldn't recover. I was a special kind of broken, all of that, right? So I get into mind body and I'm like, this makes sense. And I love that I don't have to buy another supplement. I don't have to go on this crazy diet, like all this stuff. It was really speaking to me. But I couldn't figure out how to apply it. No matter how many people I watched and I got all the information, I read all the books, I couldn't figure out how to apply it. It was like, you need to stop caring so much about your symptoms. And when you understand what the symptoms are, that they've come from repressed emotions, things like that, they're less scary, right? But I still didn't feel that. I still felt afraid of them. But then I couldn't seem to step out of that, of just like, okay, let's just stop caring so much about the symptoms. Let's like redirect the energy. Let's start living more, whatever. But it was like the flares would be so bad and the symptoms on their own without a flare were so bad that I was just like, how? I don't get how people do this. And I remember watching success stories and being like, yeah, those people are special. They're like superhumans. They're more intelligent, whatever. And I was just like completely convinced that these were the special, enlightened people or something. And so I got pregnant. My pregnancy was rough because on top of all the TMS symptoms, all the neuroplastic pain, I now had pregnancy symptoms. So it was kind of a mess. I was not comfortable at all, but that's often how pregnancy goes. I had my son and my nervous system was put into a state of fight, flight, unlike anything I've ever experienced, because my son was very colicky. Those first few months especially were just like a complete night and day difference to how I used to live. I used to have a lot of time to myself. It was all focused on me and okay, how do I heal and blah, blah, blah. And then it was, you're not getting any sleep now. You are 24/7 caring for this thing that is constantly screaming. My nervous system went into, oh my God, I felt out of my mind. And it took a little bit. It wasn't like the day after I had my son. I was like, oh my God, I get it now. I'm gonna like do this work. Like it took a little bit, but I can't remember exactly how long. We'll say maybe 4 or 5 months after having my son. And I was like, it felt like I had this one moment, but it might have been a series of moments, right? But I had this moment, it was like come to God almost, where I was like, this is either going to completely break me, completely wreck me, just leave me in bed constantly, and I'm not going to be able to get to be a mom to my son, or I'm going to go all in on this work, on what I've learned, on what I know to be true, but I haven't been able to apply it. I'm going to have to go all in on this, right? So I think the first shift was just starting to act a little bit differently. I was already gaining confidence from becoming a mom. Like being a mom, again, those first few months, I was a mess. But I started to walk with more confidence. And so I was like, okay, I'm just going to start with that, And then I really went into different perspective shifts, different things that just made me feel like I could be unbothered by the symptoms. And I realized that for me, that had to be a slow progression, because I always tried to go from really caring about the symptoms, really having them be extremely a disturbing part of my life. I always try to go from that to being completely unbothered in like a day or like an instant, like, okay, I'm just gonna do that now. And it's like, maybe I could do it for a second, but then I would sort of fall off and it would be like, oh, yeah, I'm a failure. Yeah, I can't do this. Okay, I was right. Yeah, this journey isn't for me. This is hard. Like, and so I realized that I needed to stop doing that. I needed to start looking at the moments that I was unbothered. And the interesting thing is too, that I was in a place where I stopped looking for the results because I was so focused on how do I just become a mom? How do I become a good mom? How do I become functional and stop letting these things bother me? So the focus every day wasn't even how do I get rid of these symptoms? And I'm going to do these things now to get rid of the symptoms. It was more like, I need to start doing these things so that I can function again normally. And if the symptoms are there, truly not care, because I just want to start living again, right? So that was my big turning point. And that perspective shift alone, not trying to get rid of the pain and symptoms, really accelerated my journey, I believe. So I started making a wins board, which was just Post-its. I still do this. I just started a new one, but Post-its. And I would write every day or a couple times a day, like a win from that day, right? So it would be like, I noticed that I was less concerned about my pain or symptoms for an hour today. And then it's like, boom, I'm sticking it on the wall. It was the back of my door at the time that I could see when the door was closed. And these wins started growing. This wins board started growing, and I started getting more confidence. And then on the lows, in the low times, I started looking at this board and being like, oh yeah, okay, I did that. I did that a few days ago. I was unbothered, or I went to the grocery store, or whatever. So all these wins were stacking up, right? And then I just kept experimenting with different mindset shifts, different perspective shifts that got me into a place of feeling like the symptoms didn't control me. And a big one was just being unbothered by the pain and symptoms. And that's why I created the Unbothered Challenge, because I wanted to walk people through systematically how I got this change and how I implemented this change. And I realized that you want to do it in micro shifts. You want to do it small and steady, right? Not the big extreme. In one day, you suddenly stop giving a shit about your pain and symptoms, because that didn't work. That can work for some people. I don't want anything I say to ever limit you, okay? So, but I think that it can set you up for failure a bit if that's what you expect of yourself, right? So I created the Unbothered Challenge. People are doing extremely well in it. People are getting these incredible shifts, and I'm so excited about it. But yeah, I just wanted to come on and share a little bit more about my story, my recovery journey, all of that. I have so much more to share. I mean, this is just the first video I'm making for YouTube, but yeah, there's a lot more I want to share. I recovered while in an abusive narcissistic relationship, and that's a big thing that I want to emphasize, because I know a big common doubt people have is, well, I can't recover because my life is too stressful. And I recovered in the midst of extreme stress, toxic abusive relationship, narcissist, colicky baby, like there's so much to the story. And then during that, we moved to another country also. So there's a lot. I plan on making more videos, but oh God, I should have shaved my armpits before this. Okay. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for being here. If this was helpful, Please subscribe. Please check out my offers if you want to work with me or join the Unbothered Challenge. It's very affordable and accessible, and I really poured my heart into it. And everyone who's been in it is loving it and raving about it. And okay, thank you.